Hi, everybody. This is Paul Bryan of UX Strat. Today I'm talking with Dr. Jess Holbrook, who is the co-founder and lead of the People Plus AI group at Google. Hi, Jess. Welcome to the Stratosphere.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure. Well, today I want to talk to you about the user experience of AI and your work at Google around AI. Can you tell me a little bit about your current role there?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been one of the leads of their People Plus AI research group at Google for about the past 3 years. We just had a 3-year anniversary recently. And PAIR, we go by the acronym PAIR. PAIR is a combination of a bunch of different roles that typically don't talk to each other. So we're mostly UX, user experience, and then research scientists. So not production level software engineers, although we have those at our team. But a lot of people who I say, their job is to get something working for the first time. And then our production engineer's job is to make something work for a billion people. So very different kinds of jobs. And then we've also been bringing on a lot of other roles that I think user experience folks don't typically get to work with, which are like policymakers and people that work with other like government agencies, stuff like that. So the PAIR group, we have a very wide-ranging interest in human-centered AI and machine learning as well. But we really kind of break our work up into three big buckets of things that we do. The first thing that we do primarily is we just conduct and publish human AI interaction research. So that's kind of the bread and butter. We publish at lots of conferences and venues, and we really look at all the humans that interact with AI and machine learning, from consumers to developers to policymakers, and we try to understand how their interactions work and how we can make them better in all the different kinds of ways. The second big thing we do, though, is we don't just want to write papers and create artifacts that aren't actionable. So we also create and launch open source tools and platforms to build AI responsibly. So we've been doing this for a long time. We really center our work a lot around data and model inputs and outputs. So that's really where you see the really amazing things that AI and machine learning can do, and all the problems really hit. They start at the data sets. So we create tools like facets, like the what if tool, that allow people to really inspect their data sets and understand the consequences of different choices they've made in selecting a data set and using data sets for training versus tuning, and all the decisions that go along with building a model in ML and AI. And we try to help them do that in a more responsible way. An example for that is to understand if their model is biased, but then also to be able to do something about it. So not just, it doesn't really help anybody to realize there's a problem but not be able to fix it. So we really focus on kind of closing that loop for people. And then the third thing that we do is, it's kind of hard to put a name on it, but I like to say that we widen the circle of who can participate in the development and application of AI. So, we firmly believe it shouldn't be the domain of a few different companies or a small group of people. And so we do that through a couple different means. One is through tools or platforms like TensorFlow.js. So that's something that came out of the PAIR group, which allows people to essentially experiment and start to play and frankly do some production level stuff with machine learning in their browser, which was a really big deal when it came out. If anyone in the audience has seen Teachable Machine that came out of Google, that's based on TensorFlow.js. But we also do this through a lot of outreach and events. So we have a symposium once a year where we try to gather a lot of people, typically from industry and academia, who don't often talk to each other on the topic of human-centered AI. And a more recent theme of ours, participatory ML. Not like we didn't create the idea of it, but it's in focus for us. And then the last way that we really try to widen the circle is through a lot of popular publications. So the first thing I mentioned, those are peer-reviewed articles. Those appear in academic journals or conferences. And the last, though, is more of articles and content that isn't peer-reviewed, but is much more accessible to the public. So a lot of things that range from our explorables, which are ways to use kind of text and interactive, almost think like data visualizations that help unpack complicated concepts in machine learning like fairness. All the way to one of my favorites is we started to just publish what is pair reading. So we just ask a team member to tell us 3 things or 3 to 5 things that they saw recently that they found really interesting. And when you do that, you're kind of blown away by the team you think you know so well. So we've been doing that for a long time. And we hope that what that does is make AI and machine learning more accessible to more people, and we get a broader participation. So those are the three big areas that we invest in. Oh, and I was thinking too, if people want to check out our work, everything is at pair.withgoogle.com, and you can see everything we do up there.
Awesome, outstanding. Well, it seems to me that I'm hearing a lot more about AI than I did 5 years ago, and I imagine that a lot of designers are going to be coming in contact with AI in their work environment. As you look down the road, how do you see that playing out with the user experience or product design communities? Is it going to be they suddenly have to incorporate some aspect of AI into an e-commerce site, or how does this play out to where the rest of us start using AI on a regular basis in our design work?
Yeah, it's something we've been looking at for a lot of years, and there's a big group of us who really started because we had to work with AI as a design medium essentially in our product work. So most of our experience is not born out of academic study. It's born out of on-the-job learning, if you will, which I think gives us a particularly unique kind of flavor to our work that I think is important. So yeah, we start to think about AI and machine learning as a design medium, and what does that mean for different people? And so I think it'll take a number of forms because when you try to think about, well, what can AI or ML be applied to? A lot of the current models, if you want to be a bit reductive, oh, sorry, my screen just went to sleep, so I just want to bring it back. If you look at a lot of the current models, like if I want to be really reductive, essentially what they do is prediction. They're always trying to predict some kind of inference, some kind of recommendation. They're trying to predict what they think they're seeing through the viewfinder, all these things. Sorry, I'm using kind of anthropomorphic language there, but it's kind of hard to get around at times. And so the limits in a lot of ways are just what do you want to predict, or what have you been trying to predict through heuristic coding that could be outperformed by a learned system. So the applications are extremely broad. We think it'll touch just about every designer's workflow at some point. It's a bit kind of like the web and mobile. It's not evenly dispersed in the beginning, but that's the way it's heading. So we don't see that changing anytime soon. And I think people will adapt to it at different levels of the technology, kind of like we have with other platforms, or I don't want to call it a platform, but the web and mobile are kind of the easiest analogies. So some of those will be very kind of superficial. So you might have like a video recommendation system. You had a design where the videos that were recommended were based on heuristics, and now they're based on a machine learned model. Your design may not change a ton, with a few exceptions that you might have to explain where that video came from versus not. Then, like anything, we can dig a lot deeper into the technology and how it's being used. So for us, we really try to wed a lot of the really well-known human-centered design approaches and the few new things you need to know with machine learning and AI. So things like choosing your use cases and making sure that machine learning will actually be better than the existing solution is really important. That's something we talk about in our People Plus AI guidebook. Another thing that a lot of UXers aren't used to is actually thinking a lot more about data and the data that goes into the model and how that drives the experience. Most of us have not had to ever consider that before in any of our designs or our research or anything like that. But we have a whole user research effort dedicated to really understanding where data comes from, how it's used, how that affects the model output, and then eventually how that affects the user experience of those things. You also have really interesting new phenomena that have come out. New more in the spotlight around trust. So machine learning and AI systems are probabilistic, which means they are very good at predicting whatever they're supposed to predict, usually better than a heuristic system, but they still get it wrong. And so we have a whole effort, and we talk about this in the guidebook as well, is around calibrated trust. So it's important for people not to trust a machine learning and AI system too much or too little. We're trying to get them to have an accurate mental model of the system so they can trust it with the appropriate amount. And then there's just lots of stuff when it comes to errors and fallbacks and, basically saying like when the AI or the machine learning gets it wrong, and it's always when, it's not if, what is that experience? How do you have a fallback to that? And so I think there's all these things that really range from, as a designer or UXer, nope, nothing's really changed with this, kind of do what we've always done, which are things like focus on people in use cases, all the way over to actually you have this brand new job that you never thought you had to do. Like one of my favorites is, supervised learning, you have to label examples to train a model. And so you have to, a human has to go in and say, there's two pictures. Do either of these pictures have a penguin in it? Say penguin, not penguin. We have people really looking at, and there's a long history of this in the human computation research of how do you design those tasks well? Because if you can design them well, you can get much higher quality data, you can get a much better user experience, and you can save your company a lot of money. Those are all really good things, but most people I know have never designed a rater or a labeler task before. And so there's kind of these really interesting new aspects to the job that emerge when working with AI and machine learning.
It seems to me that the current state of AI involves kind of a handful of companies, lots of universities, of course, around the world, but a handful of companies that really have the data and the resources to invest in that. Some in China, some in the US, some other places. And you're talking about rules that are generated for AI to function and machine learning. Are we kind of developing a future set of templates based on sort of a few people, or is there some guidance inside that system that randomizes that, so it's not really like, I don't know, the San Francisco Beijing templates for AI?
Yeah, well, I'm in Seattle, so I don't trust anybody from San Francisco area. Yeah, it's a big concern right now, and I think a lot of people are looking at what does it mean? What are the effects of that concentration in a lot of ways? And one thing to remember is the rapid pace of machine learning AI had a winter, and you had kind of the deep learning dawn or whatever you want to call it that just woke everything back up, and it's been at this rapid clip ever since. And so people are really dealing with these issues in real time, and of course we have people in the field that see them before the rest of us do, and have been trying to fly the flags about this, and I think they're finally getting kind of the attention they deserve. And those are people like Joy and Tim Neath and a lot of people, and Meg, and a lot of people that I get to work with at Google. And so what we're trying to now work out is frankly all the different aspects of that, of when it comes to the responsible ways that AI and machine learning are applied. Are we, and it's not just about the data, it's about the use case of it. And so you see this has been really, really prominent in the use of facial recognition technology, right? There's kind of a case of like, one is there's inaccuracies. You have models that are nowhere near as accurate as anyone claims them to be or tries to be. Second, the accuracy totally varies based on your skin tone and a million other factors. But then the more important thing is more of a ethical question of like, should we use this technology at all? It's a bit of like the Jeff Goldblum Jurassic Park, like, yeah, you could, but should you? And I think one of the really interesting things that's happening there is it's forcing people to have a concentrated conversation around ethics and what do we collectively want as a group that we have essentially been able to not have or put off or dodge for quite some time. And kind of the fascinating thing is, when you work with software, the great thing is like, code is precise, but it kind of forces us to be precise, which a lot of the way society works is actually through imprecision, gray areas, being able to, bend the rules here and there. But now we're trying to like encode these conversations. So if you're going to encode those if you're going to encode that, I shouldn't say conversations, but you're going to encode that, collective belief, collective desire, collective vision for a future, you better make sure you have everybody there, or else you have not really created a vision for everybody. If this is going to be serving as a general purpose, and a lot of times the most pernicious problems are just naivete, or people that think that, well, I represent everybody. Like, I'm a normal person, so I don't need to go talk to anybody. Like, I'll just do what I want. And that has numerous issues with it. And it seems kind of ridiculous once you say it out loud, but it does happen. And I think that's one of the harder problems in the field right now, that people are trying to figure out. There's a lot of us trying different things, but I would say nobody has it figured out that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you would have to have a certain background. I mean, you have a doctoral degree. It seems like you'd have to have a certain background just to understand how to work with it in the first place. And yet, I guess the facial recognition one, because it reached such a large audience and attention, that's a real, clear example. But I'm thinking of really much smaller things, to where the way that you talk to your telephone company, your carrier, is kind of guided by whoever put that together. So the different cognitive styles that want to accomplish that, they kind of have like one track way to get their problem solved. It feels like, I don't know, just as kind of a layperson.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the problem. Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, and this kind of comes back to, like, how do you want to use it, right? You totally could create something where you essentially forced all of your customers into a very mechanized, impersonal experience, when they call your company, or whatever it might be. And, that's your choice if you think that serves your customers best, or serves your business bottom line best, I guess, or something like that. But, you can do that through heuristic systems and janky, press one for this, press two for that systems, or you can do it with more sophisticated AI ML. That's one of the things we've seen too, is there are cases where actually using AI and ML can make it worse. Like, you meant to make it better, but it's actually the simpler system is a much better option for a lot of cases.
I wonder if there's a time when we'll have a number of Jungian archetypes where, okay, you have to have like 16 cognitive styles baked into whatever this problem-solving AI is going to be, so that everybody, all these types at least, are represented in that case.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, kind of back to who's included, and you kind of mentioned my background. Yeah, my background's in social psychology, and so one of the things that's interesting to me is, getting all these different perspectives in. So there's a lot of calls for, like, more, especially people from the social sciences, and I'm a social scientist, so of course I'm pro that. But there's also, frankly, just a lot of integration of them into the product development process. Like, it's kind of one thing to, like, invite them in and have them sit there, but there's a different thing of, yeah, but there's nowhere for them to plug in, because we've designed a product design system that doesn't account for that. So then we have to actually change. I've been looking at, some older thinking on the topic. So I've been, personally reading, like, some of old, like, Victor Papanek's stuff, and looking at, how do you actually create these multidisciplinary teams. But if you start to have an anthropologist and a behavioral economist and a philosopher and a poet and everything else on staff, like, okay, but how do they work together? What do they do? And how does that create something better than was there before? And that gets into how you judge better, because you're probably going to change what your definition of success and how you measure it, or how you observe it, or how you communicate it to other people. And so we're just, I think, at that early stage of, like, we should have the people around. And so we're starting to do that. But then once they're all there, that changes the party in a lot of different ways. And I don't think we really know what that looks like yet. I think there's some early experimentation, some early lessons, but nobody, I wouldn't believe anybody that says they got it figured out at this point.
So do some of the teams at Google then come to your team as an advisor or as a service, like, let's say, assistant? Let's say there's going to be kind of a new in-car assistant product. Would they then come to your team and say, hey, we need some help on the people plus AI version of what we're doing, or is it more you have to publish and they have to read about it, or how does that work?
Yeah, it really goes. I mean, Google is a very fluid place in that way of like it really goes both ways. So um, we have teams reach out to us. One of the things that we have is kind of this deep experience with this technology, and we also get a nice view because we get to work with a bunch of different teams. So, but we don't have the domain expertise in every area. So, what's kind of nice though is one of our most valuable things we do sometimes is say like, hey, you should go talk to this other team because they've actually solved your problem already. You just don't realize it yet, and we just happen to get connected. Um, all the way to things like we will work with teams for a day, multiple days. We've done in the past, there's some published work on this that's really cool, is we did a bungee program. So this is like a, let me try to get this. Hey, there we go. So we did a bungee program where we basically we had people, UXers rotate in with the research group to really help them think about their product work. And that was really early on, and we have a much more robust team now. So we have teams that reach out to us on a fairly regular basis. We also reach out to teams. So we say, hey, I know you didn't ask for our help, but we kind of see a bump in the road coming down there, and we're here to help. And Google is a very open place, and a lot of people take us up on that. One of the other goals, though, really early on with the project was we always said, when we got into the UX of AI, is we always said, we're happy to be experts in it, but we have no interest in being the only experts in it. Like our goal is to train the next 1,000 experts that will then train the next 10,000 experts, and on and on and on. So we are very active in giving away what we know and what we figured out almost as rapidly as we can. And I think we're really lucky is that's our job within the company. We're very fortunate to have that in our titles, as you will, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. In fact, you're giving a talk next week at the XD 2020 conference. Can you tell me a little bit about what that's going to be about?
Yes, yeah, very excited. Very excited to be giving that. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about what PAIR does, and then some of the things, getting into some of those practical steps I mentioned with the guidebook. So getting into things like how do you practically decide if machine learning or AI is appropriate for the thing you're building. A lot of us, especially UXers, get told, the product manager, the engineering leader, whoever's like, we're mandate from above, whatever execs say we need to AI this thing. And so how do we actually evaluate whether it's the appropriate thing? Another thing I'm going to talk a little bit about is data and the designer and the UXer's role when it comes to data and understanding data, and in that, hopefully help people be a little bit more conversant with their teams about data and the right questions to ask. And then the last thing is, I mentioned that earlier too, is the calibrating trust. So how do you think about how much and in what ways the people who use your product should trust you? And how do you get that right? And we have really great conversations with teams at Google where we say, we actually need your trust scores to come down because essentially people are over trusting your product, and that's a really hard kind of conversation to have. At times. And then, kind of try to wrap it all together in this concept of kind of a more sustainable approach to AI. Like, are we approaching this technology in a way that we see a future for it for many, many years, in a way that it's going to be, generative, not extractive?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was with my youngest son, Christian, in Amsterdam. We had the privilege of being there together. And he was saying, what I would like is if Google just knew what I've done so far and what I liked and would just tell me what to do today. And I was like, really? I cannot imagine living that way. But yeah, he was just like, they can just make better suggestions than I can make. They know the stores I'm probably going to like. And so I wonder if there's like an age gradient there that says that trust is okay, okay with me, or the trust is not okay with me.
Yeah, I mean, in our research, we definitely see generational differences, but also, an important thing for us is really to think hard about this automation versus augmentation. This is kind of a classic challenge in literature, and we're pretty firm believers in augmentation. We talk about this in the guidebook of like when you want to augment versus automate. I like to think of it as how are we helping people be better versions of themselves, who they aspire to be, the kind of people They want to be on a path to become, and how are we using AI and ML to that? And sometimes that's very low level basic stuff. Like I want, how can we scale doctors when there's one doctor for every 10,000 people, say in different parts of the world, all the way up to I want to be more creative. How can I be more creative? And I didn't ask for an AI to be creative for me. I said I want to be more creative. So then, how can an AI help me become more creative? And kind of everything in between. And so, we look at that. That's a lens that is at the fore of all the work that we do.
Well, that sounds like a great way to end our conversation today. I'm really looking forward to your talk next week, and thanks for talking to me today.
Great. Thanks, Paul. I really enjoyed it.